How's it going, Guardians? It is your boy Turkey again here at SGN Hub, bringing you another build video. And as I always say, I like to get quick and straight to the point. So today I'm going to be bringing you guys a Warlock build. Obviously, you'll still have some sources of damage, but by no means are you going to be, topping DPS charts. But if you do find yourself in a fire team where you're taking sustained damage and your teammates keep on going down, and there seems to be no particular remedy, whether it be a well, because you can't have it all the time, and you can't have a bubble all the time, but this remedies that downtime on supers and things that can maintain a fire team whenever you're playing with newer people or people who aren't particularly geared for the situation that you're in. And the two exotics that we're going to be looking at today are first and foremost the Edge of Intent, which is the Warlock specific glaive, and we will read the exotic trait as follows. Restorative Turret. When weapon energy is full, consume it before firing to make your next shot deploy a healing turret on impact. Now, not too long ago, this was actually changed, and thanks to a comment that I actually saw in the previous video, I was able to confirm that they also changed the healing factor in another way on it. So upon reaching your maximum glaive energy, you hold your reload key, and you're going to fire anywhere. You can see, with the glaive, I assume it probably adheres to the glaive distance. It will fire a turret that will essentially shoot out heals for you the same way that the Lumina does. And the other exotic that pairs well with this that we're going to be using is the Boots of the Assembler, which allows us to essentially double down on the ranged healing factor whenever we're not necessarily next to teammates to cast our own rift or empowered rift, or well of radiance. And to counteract that, the Boots of the Assembler themselves actually work, like I said, similar to Lumina and similar to the exotic glaive functionality. Standing in a healing rift creates noble seekers that seek out allies that are not in a rift and heal them. Standing in an empowering rift creates noble seekers that create both you and your ally a damage bonus. Each time a seeker finds one of your allies, the duration of your rift is briefly extended while you are standing in it. And this also provides a moderate benefit to Lumina, but we're not using Lumina, so that doesn't necessarily matter. Now, if we want to break down the numbers of it, currently on dim, it says standing in a rift creates noble seekers every 5 seconds that seek out allies within 35 meters and apply a buff to them. And that buff is going to be dependent on whether or not, obviously, you have a healing rift or an empowering rift. And the healing rift restores 75 HP and starts health regeneration if you're, for the seekers. Now, if you have an empowering rift, you're going to get a 35% damage buff in PvE and 15% in PvP for 5 seconds. 35% is actually pretty solid, I'm not going to lie. So that's something that you could swap over to. I guess I've never really used the empowering rift, but since you do have the passive turret from your Warlock glaive, that could potentially mitigate some of that damage you're not getting, but having a 35% damage buff would actually be pretty solid. I'm gonna have to test that out. But it also reads that the amount of noble seekers spawned is equal to the fire team size with a minimum of 1, which would obviously, just be yourself. And it also says each time a noble seeker applies a buff, the rift duration is paused for 5 seconds. I've never really paid that much attention to it. The thing that I like to focus on more than anything is just the seekers themselves, and you get your rift pretty often, and having the glaive be essentially like a miniature rift now that it provides cure when you're next to it. They did slow the rate of fire on the orbs that the healing turret does provide you, but it does cure and it pulsates a heal. So if you pair that with the Boots of the Assembler and the Restorative Turret, those two things in together, you have just constant healing going out to your teammate, and you don't really have to do much for it. So when you're in those situations where, like I said, you're playing with people who are new to the game, or they don't quite have that exotic yet, or the content is just massacring you and you're just dying simply from damage, this can remedy that. And most people would say it takes up an exotic slot and it doesn't have much use, but since we are playing Solar Warlock, it's extremely easy to proc Radiant. And when you proc Radiant, obviously that makes this weapon anti-barrier, so it does serve a champion functionality. Although glaives don't have a champion mod this season, you can find a way to circumvent that and find use for it anyways. Of the 3 glaives, obviously I mentioned this is the one that I do have the least experience with, but I also found this one to be the one that I used the most whenever I was introducing my dad to the game and getting a couple friends back into the game and into higher geared situations. Like some of my best builds, and it's not like I'm bad at the game, you know, at least I hope not. Some of my best builds I had a hard time carrying through Master and Grandmaster Nightfalls or Legend content, but sometimes whenever I'd switch to this build, like nobody would die. And it's not necessarily about just getting through the content, it's about maintaining like a fun experience for the people that you're playing with, and serving the actual role of a healer I found to be extremely gratifying, because you see how effective it actually is. And one final tip, I guess, actually for the primary and the heavy slot, I didn't mention this at the start, I probably should have. I currently have the Hung Jury SR4, the Adept version, which comes with Shoot to Loot and Kinetic Tremors, which pairs really well with this, so you can find, you know, more Glaive ammo and you don't really have to be all over the place, which just gives you a little bit more breathing room in terms of having to jump all over the place to distribute those heals. If you see somebody getting hurt across the map and you have your Glaive charged, you can just fire your turret across the map, or you can cast a well and the Seekers will go heal that person. And it's just, like I said, it's a way to allow your fire team to better experience the game if healing and damage is what's ending their game, if that makes sense. If you've been in the situation that I'm mentioning, you understand. If you haven't, you haven't, and maybe this might be something fun for you to try. But in the heavy slot, I either have the Slammer Adept with bait and switch and chain reaction, or I'll have the Retrofit Escapade, which is crafted and has 4 times a charm and target lock. And another solid choice that I will say, other than obviously Crux Terminator, that's the thing I do like having that in the exotic slot, is you have a pretty solid heavy you know, picks, is the Terminus Horizon from Spire of the Watcher, and that is super underrated. It has target lock and triple tap. And yeah, that's really just my analysis of this glaive. It's a lot more fun than I think people give it credit for, and it definitely has a niche spot. And I would like to see, like I said, more, not necessarily push into the class specific roles, but whenever you have a healer, like really allow them to heal aside from just the Well of Radiance. Provide them a way for that to feel useful. And I think this is a really good step into the idea of healing without necessarily having to use Illumina and shoot at everything, because this thing has really solid uptime as well. And as I mentioned in my previous videos, I will be doing another build video post for the Titan Glaive, the Edge of Action. Be sure to be looking out for that one. But once again, there will be a dim link in the description for this. I appreciate you guys sticking around and checking out the whole video. It's your boy Turkey here at SGN Hub. Peace. I love you. I'm gone.